To introduce Connie Weaver, who is moderating the panel. And one thing I saw came out in the Hartford Business Journal, Hartford was voted #7 for Business One. So I think that's a pretty awesome thing, and Connie's definitely a very successful businesswoman. So with that, she's the co-founder, CEO of Tracker Group, a strategic advisory firm of entrepreneurial executives, and they demonstrate success leading change and managing relationships to create value. Before the Tracker Group, she has an extensive background as financial services executive and SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at TIAA, also Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Hartford, and serving on many boards in the area like Make-A-Wish Foundation, Red Cross, CT Public Broadcasting, and Robert H. Smith School of Business at University of Maryland. Also very exciting today, she's donning the blue and green from her most recent project. And we'll let her talk a little bit about that.
Hi, Connie Weaver. So good to see so many of you, and it's really nice to reconnect with some folks I haven't seen for a while. Can we grab the other mic? Oh good, so we can have it to share. So at any rate, yeah, you mentioned today was a big day because I'm working with Hartford Athletic. We're bringing professional soccer to the city and rehabbing the Dillon Stadium, and that was fun. So, now to the real deal. We have a tremendous panel here. And if you think about it, as a former CMO, and I'm a CMO at TIA it took me 7 years to literally transform, and I mean transform top to bottom, the financial services company, including the retirement department, the annuities that we offer for teachers, etc. And so I've lived and worked around transformation all my life. Yeah, it is lives. I guess I'm in a new life now, whatever. But at any rate, if you really think about the commonality, whether it's the Hartford, P&C, at that time Life, whether it's the annuities business, whether the healthcare business, all of the different aspects that we touch across insurance, it comes back to a core commonality that is changing very rapidly, and that's who we serve, the customer. And I must say, I was impressed when we did a show of hands earlier on about how many people in the room are from core traditional insurance companies or from brokers and from some of the startups and the new insure technologies that are emerging. But you know, I ask you to think about who's the real customer. And how fast is that changing? Because I remember at the Hartford, we always debated about whether it was agent and broker, or it was the end user, was it both? Because in the end we served, it was a B2B2C model. And how do we think about behaviors, the needs, how do you prioritize and do it without disintermediating the model? And so that's why I'm really excited about our panel here today, because we cross the spectrum of P&C, of annuities, life, reinsurance, and a little bit of healthcare on a tangential, but also new technologies, new analytical capabilities, and new ways of thinking. And so it's a really interesting time because as our population and our customer changes, as we see a very different shift in the, shall we say, the demographics that we're all serving. 80 million people matriculating into retirement. They'll be there by 2020, 2021. They're living longer, behaving differently. And oh, by the way, many more of them are women who are inheriting the wealth around it and having to make decisions and ill prepared to deal with financial or investment related decisions, which include insurance. Then you got the little Xers in the middle, 50 million of them, you know, finding their way, who are going to be sort of walking into new responsibilities, different places, and then millennials and Z coming behind it, 80+ million there, who from the last speaker I thought did a great job talking about some of the new models and some of the stresses they're under. And by the way, inventing and adopting new models isn't just about behaviors. It's also about the fact that they're carrying the highest level of student loan debt in any generation in the last, actually ever. And therefore, they're having to make different choices early on and postponing things which are manifesting different behaviors and creating new opportunities, which gets into sort of this whole shift. and who is our customer anyway. And then we have the whole layer of financial advisors and insurance brokers and intermediaries of all shapes and sizes that are trying to figure out where they fit in the value chain and where the relationships lie. So that's kind of the basis for the conversation today. And we're going to talk about that starting with the customer. I want to go back to the basics of the customer and then talk about some innovative ways large companies are changing and experimenting. So new technology is coming in, a lot of things for us to think about as we think about the changing role of the customer. So we're going to start with Paul Tyler. Paul is CMO for NASA Re, and he has got a deep, long background of over 30 years, really understanding, working with brands, customers, transformation, engagement, digitization, and all of the elements that we've been through in both B2B and B2C models, and B2B2C models as well, across the spectrum of companies. So I want to bring you back to the customer. Let's bring you back to the basics of the customer and talk a little bit about, particularly because you're doing some really interesting things now in your new world. How do you think about segmentation models, really slicing and dicing? How do you get back to the basics and think about that customer, which is the foundation for your user experience basics?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. I was looking around to see who was that.
Yep. You didn't want you want a new title? Shall I give you a new title?
Yeah. No. It's I think change has really come quickly to the life and annuity business, and I know we're both in the retirement space for a number of years, so we've got some common items to bond on here. It used to be customer service was such a rare event. I mean, the only time you call your life insurance agency is when something really major happens, unlike the P&C business. So when you bought the policy, it was a little murky as to what kind of service you were buying. I think a lot of carriers, really, if you started to prioritize where do I put the money, customer service was way down because it just wasn't visible. Well, Facebook, Twitter, Yelp, all this comes along, and suddenly say we're not on Facebook. Well, yes, you are on Facebook. You just don't realize it because people are talking about you and saying things. I think in the last 5 years, a lot of companies have kind of realized the difference. That said, big organization, it takes a really long time for people to not think of customer service in our business as an expense, but sort of an investment in growth. I think the good news is a lot of companies have. And Connie, that's really where we've been focused over the last 2 years at our company is we were fortunate enough to we purchased Phoenix to bring us some really good talent, especially people who work, very long tenured people working in the customer service area, and we actually turned that into a positive. So we've kind of gone very made a big investment in strategically in making the service experience and the ratings very, very visible on our website. So I think step one and it's very interesting, internally it's taken a while, but I think now we've got a whole senior management team. Every time we get a 2-star rating coming through, all excited about it, which is good, which is really good because I think we've got a team that's recognizes that how we're perceived by the consumer can actually drive business that we get through primarily through an independent agent channel today.
I think you're 100% right, and I do think the industry has changed dramatically, and there's so many new tools and technology and data capabilities for engagement. And let's face it, in many cases, in a B2B2C model, that is your line of direct interaction with that end user, and it's becoming more and more important for loyalty and things along those lines. So with that in mind, when we think about customer behaviors, often, name, rank, serial number, gender, how many clicks did you make? I mean, what's the transactional path you're taking? All of those things are critical. However, the way we make customers feel, the behavioral side of the customer experience is honestly often overlooked. And there are many industries that may improve efficiency, but may make a person feel less adequate. Simplicity, things like that, things that are overlooked. So now I'd like to go to Anurag Shah and talk a little bit about what the work that's being done at Argus Analytics. And I think it's really, really interesting when you think about some of the customer intelligence, the customer experience types of models that the company is working with, things that enable not only the ability to drive a better customer experience, but drive better service, know more, and most importantly, begin to develop a cadence where you can begin to predict and guide a customer moving forward. And there's a term called sentiment analysis. Now, I must admit, that was a new term for me, so I want to understand what is it, how is it important, and how does it fit into the build of the customer experience that often leads you into really creating what will be a compelling value proposition and loyalty.
Sure. Thanks, Connie. So, it's a very interesting question, and especially if you look at it from the insurance perspective, we are still trying, you mentioned at the start, who is the customer? So that's the first question. And so we start caring about the customer, and the second question comes is customer experience, but the big question there is how do you measure customer experience, right? So that's been the big question. So if you can't measure it, you're not tracking it and you're not valuing it, right? So one of the things that we've been working pretty hard at is, can we build a mechanism that helps measure customer sentiment? The most common technique today, and we call this as a explicit feedback, is to basically go and ask the customer, what do you think about us, right? Run surveys, run feedback, which is great, and then the customer's telling you what they like, what they don't like. The challenge with that is, how many of us fill feedback forms, right? So they are important, but not enough, right? So I think we are today going, and as the previous speaker also mentioned, right, and we're going to the age where the customer expects you to know them, right? So instead of asking the customer, you should know what the customer is going through. So we've built this concept, and over a period of time using some of the technologies, is we call it the centimeter, right? Which basically looks at all these different data sets and creates a sentiment score for every single customer, irrespective of whether the customer's given you feedback or not, right? Now you can take this as the base measure, and then you can basically figure out whether you want to do better customer service, do you really know the customer, and definition of the customer care doesn't matter whether it's an end user or the broker or the agent, doesn't really matter who it is, as far as you can measure it. So we've kind of built this, and we are helping carriers develop this as one of the key components within their entire ecosystem of customer experience. So customer experience is a lot of other things, but we think that sentiment can essentially drive it, and if you can look at all these different unstructured data that's available and find the customer sentiment, you don't ask them, you know it already. That is one big starting point for you to have great engagement with the customer. Right?
I couldn't agree with you more, because I think that customer sentiment and understanding the way customers feel after they interact with us have everything to do with building loyalty and their referenceability, and frankly, keeping them, expanding them for the long term. So with that in mind, there are a lot of traditional carriers who are changing very, very rapidly. As a matter of fact, they're out in the forefront, and we're going to talk about Travelers a little bit here. Somebody I competed with, but also admired for many years from across the road. So Rick Hefferman is the second vice president of customer experience and digital strategy. Now that sounds good, but it's what he's done over the last several years that impresses me, which is to go into a traditional business, and believe me, I tried to do this years ago, and it was a slow process, where you go into a fundamental personal lines business, and you start to really create innovation, pockets of innovation that lead to change, that begin to change business strategies, business models. And you know, Rick, I know you've done some cool things, even sending people down to live in New York and understand the way the real world works in a city and how that's changing. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the cool things you're doing, and at the same time, coming out of that, change is hard. How did you bring the culture along? How did you get the momentum to become now today an integral part of the strategy of that division?
Well, there's a lot there. But I'll start, I guess I'll start by, the first thing, when I took this role, it'll be almost 4 years ago, the idea of customer experience in personal lines at Travelers was not even really an idea. It wasn't taking hold anywhere. We were a very product-focused company, very agent-focused company. And the idea of customer experience was put off on, well, that's something that claims does. That's something that we do in our call centers. It's something that the agent does. We don't have to worry about that here. And when I asked, who do you think the customer is, there were all kinds of answers, right? So job one was centering on who is the customer and figuring that out and saying and declaring this is our goal, right? This is the customer. And other people took offense to that and would say, well, are you devaluing the agent? No, I'm just putting a name on it, right? Like, we can't focus on anything that we can't put a label on it and say, this is customer, this is agent. By splitting those two, we're able to put the right amount of focus on both of them, two most important parts of our business. But yeah, change was hard. That was the first step. Second step was, I asked the question, how many customers do we have? And I thought that was going to be just a layup, right? Really, really hard, right? Nobody knew. Everybody looked and was like, I can tell you how many policies we have, but nobody knew how many customers we have. So there was a long, long way to go, and really just trying to find, what I tried to do is figure out what's the centering thing, the thing that pretty much everyone could connect with. If you didn't think that you were connected to the customer, what was that thing that I could get everyone to believe in the place? And a lot of that was, we started out with expenses, right? How do we drive down expense? And there's this great thing that, like, in a lot of cases, when you're at a big insurance company, when you're driving expense out of an organization, you're taking friction out of process. And that's exactly what makes customers happy, right? So there was this nice correlation that I knew was there, but didn't tell everybody, right? It was byproduct that I thought was going to be really awesome. So that was 4 years ago. We've evolved. We've made a declaration that innovation was going to be a big focus of ours. And it was about customer experience, it's about changing our business model. You alluded to us going and living down in New York. We launched a product called Traverse, which was a very innovative thing for an old 160-year-old insurance company like ours. It was a marketplace that we didn't play in at all. We were really targeting city millennials. We thought that this was a marketplace that was underinsured. They didn't see the need for it. They didn't see the value for insurance. And we didn't have a product for it. So in the space of 8 months, we stood up a brand new product, did all the filings, did all the forms, figured out a value proposition, did a ton of customer, like just sitting with customers, asking what they wanted, branding, marketing, advertising. In 8 months, we launched a company called Traverse in one state, New York, and more importantly, learned a heck of a lot through the process. So.
And I love that you were able to do some of the experimentation, because it's what we learn through those processes, what works, what doesn't work, that really propels forward and frankly gives people the courage to take that next step. Experimentation and doing what I call the off-Broadway mini experiment really is powerful, and doing them with partners and new technologies is a great way to bring a more traditional mindset along, shall we say it that way.
And Rick, didn't that project play a key role in your Amazon partnership?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there
Yeah.
you go. See, a birth of a partnership.
Yeah, and the Amazon, we had actually planned for that Amazon partnership before it came to us. As some of these kind of what if scenarios that we do in our leadership activities. We're saying, well, what would we do if Amazon came and called? How would we answer that? And then they called, right? So we had a plan. It was a fortuitous moment. But for those who don't know, we launched the first of its kind in the U.S. Marketplace for insurance, selling smart home devices directly on Amazon's website, and we launched a program where when you buy our home insurance product in select states, not Connecticut, sorry, we'll get there. You get a free Echo device, and we've kind of pitched that as that Echo device is the way that you service your home insurance product.
It's interesting because it's a whole different kind of relationship with the customer that can broaden. And, it really comes back to things like behavioral economics, which drives so much of the decisioning across the spectrum of different insurance products in different industries. And our next speaker, Sudha Megan, is the co-founder and CEO of Razi AI. And she is indeed a behavioral economist, as you've been described to me. And, but I think more importantly, now we're talking about AI, a cloud-based product that can really engage with vocal learning, social engagement, the natural voice, and bridge words and behaviors together in a way that you can start to surface personalized data. And let's face it, today, it's no longer one-to-many. It's all about personalization. It's meet me where I want to be met around what's important to me and make it real. And how we get to that and then can use new technologies to mine the reservoirs of data that we all have in our businesses is really key. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you're doing, because I think it's fascinating, but most importantly, about the impact you can have as you move people from buckets of data, often isolated, to actionable, personalized outcomes.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you all for being here. I think this is an incredibly exciting time and an exciting thought experiment and I would say even engagement around looking at each individual, as Connie said, meeting them where they are on their terms. And what we at Rosie AI really try to embody and exemplify is how can we remember an individual customer, I'm going to use that word, across all of their different journey moments, all of their different interactions with an insurance company, whether it's filing a claim, looking at bundling their home and auto, looking at renewals, so that you have the history of what happened before. So that individual customer is not the only person that knows their narrative. So how we make this come to life is around recognizing that at the end of the day, we truly believe that customer experience really means relationships. And relationships takes into consideration all of the different people that interact in insurance. And so what we use, the nomenclature that we fall on is stakeholders. That end policy holder, that's a stakeholder. The agent is a stakeholder. Your service representative on the phone at 4 p.m. on Memorial Day when you get into a car accident, that's a stakeholder. When you have someone coming to your home to evaluate the crash, to evaluate the loss, that is also a stakeholder. And so what we look at is how can you synchronize the activities that happen in this entire ecosystem at every single journey moment, all the while recognizing that no matter what people say about the younger generation and they don't want to speak to people, what they want is to be able to speak when they want, in the manner that they want, and get the answers that they want immediately. And so what we do is look at it from the perspective of two main areas. One, how can you enable conversation so that we don't just have to guess at what people are thinking. We can understand what they're saying in colloquial terms, be able to engage in that conversation. And then also when it gets, and that's in an automated like self-service type of way. For example, if you were to go to Alexa and ask about home advisory, home maintenance elements, all the way to asking for claim status, these are all autonomous experiences, again, in someone's home. But then, when they get forwarded to a live person, when they get forwarded to that human touch, how can you remember the interactions they had before, give context to that service representative, even the agent, so that they're in the loop, and then guide them on what type of in-the-moment care can be provided, but also what proactive engagement can be provided. So one thing that we see in insurance is that insurance is evolving to be more than just a payer, more than just that promissory payment that follows you through. It's evolving to be risk advisory. And you have several industry reports looking at the fact that when when organizations are able to do something with that personalized data, when provide greater consultative advisory, people are willing to invest more in that relationship. The lifetime value of a customer, that loyalty, truly has an impact. And so what we think of it is, customer experience might be new in insurance, but it is absolutely, I would say, the economic optimum in that curve, that mutual optimum between how organizations can benefit, how agents can benefit, and the end customer can benefit.
It sounds like nirvana to me. I wish I had had a little more of that in my former role. But the ability to really understand behaviors across channels, and particularly when some channels you control and other channels you don't, is really critical when it comes down to personalization. So now let's pivot a little bit to platforms, because at the end of the day, it's all built on platforms. And those platforms in the insurance industry, since it's one of the oldest industries in this country, a lot of them are built on old bones, older systems. I know I had to deal with the Siebel system, and I think we had to go to the back closet to find parts for the longest time at TIA, because that's how all the annuities were actually registered by number. So, you take where we've been and you look at how you then evolve new platforms, new technologies, bring in new partners to change the game around these other systems. So now we're going to turn to our CIO on the panel. And our CIO, Jay Villancourt, is the CIO of Hartford Steam Boiler. And you first think of Hartford Steam Boiler, it's been around for a while. And it's in a lot of businesses. But it's also doing some incredibly innovative things to evolve those different businesses and move things forward. But I think, you've had, years of experience really working through different platforms, different generations, modernization, transformation, and now it's moving faster than ever. And let's put data right in there with it, because let's face it, that sits in buckets. How do you do it? How do you think about it? And in particular, how do you open the door for new technologies, new ideas to come in to that system and balance that change?
Yes, thank you, Connie, very much. So it is a journey. It is a journey. So I was impressed because I had my statistics. Hartford Steam Boiler is 152 years old, but Rick said Travelers is 160. So we're younger than he is. That's great.
Well, the Hartford was 200, so who's bragging?
Gotcha. So I'm the young guy on the panel, I see. So Hartford Steam Boiler, to Connie's point, has just been around a long time. You just think about the words, Hartford Steam Boiler. It just resonates old, right?
Well, we can make old cool. Us people
my
in
journey is
France.
I'm going to get you to cool after this. Watch this. So, steam boilers, obviously there was a need. Steam boilers blow up and they hurt a lot of people. Insuring steam boilers was obviously the founding things that we did. Over the years, you look at the customer changes. We struggle with customer. We have a little different customer experience as well. We're much more white labeled. So our customer is our competitor. So Travelers sells a lot of our product. Folks in this forum sell a lot of our product. So customer is important to us. There's the end customer. There's the carrier customer for us. And the journey for us in getting from, basic equipment breakdown types of services to where we are today, opening up new worlds of possibilities in risk mitigation, using IoT platforms, opening up our legacy world, if you would, to be able to work alongside of this. So we have this incredibly fast-moving IoT world. We're putting sensors in all these boiler rooms. We're putting sensors in churches. We're trying to mitigate risks through collecting data. What's going on in a church Monday through Saturday when there's nobody there? Is it a water leak, right? What's going on in there? Is the boiler working? Is the temperature rising or falling? We're collecting all of this data streaming into us over different types of devices, and you can't believe the amount of data you can get. That's good news and bad news. So, it's not just the data we want, right? We want to know the customer. What's going on in that church? Do we notice that the lights come on every day at 4 in the morning? What do we notice, right? We get to know our customer through data that's streaming into us. So that's this new world that seems to be moving incredibly quick. Sensors, as you know, are probably evolving as a piece of equipment much faster than anything else we have, other than perhaps that autonomous car capabilities and the amount of data those spit out. So we are struggling along with keeping the lights on in the legacy world and trying to really keep up with this new and quick, fast-paced world. So it's a really great challenge for us. Knowing the customer and that customer experience for us, we find the carriers are our customer, and so are those churches. So the more data we learn about that church, we tell it to our carriers who are selling that product for us, who then get to know the customer better as well. So it's a journey on how do you learn about your customer and making sure your customers know about your customer. I didn't sound as...
That sounds good.
So, but to pass that data on, right? And we should all be getting better and better at that. So today we find we have to segment these two worlds though. So the world of keeping the lights on for systems that keep track of boilers the old-fashioned way, and then how are we keeping track of boilers in the new way, right? The skill set, as you can imagine, is different, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this, this kind of what I'll call legacy versus, mode 1 versus mode 2 type of organizations. But we're making that transition. We're doing a great job at it. We have great partnerships, and that's where Connie led us to. So you can't do it on your own, right? We count on folks like a lot of folks in this room, folks who are bringing us innovative ideas. We're going out looking for innovative ideas. I'm excited to be here. There's a lot of innovative ideas in the room. That's really where you can make the leaps and the bounds. So that's kind of the journey, and hopefully have another 152 years to go and watch these sensors really take off.
That's one of the really great things about Insurtech, and as my first experience with the organization, I am incredibly impressed with the number of the openness and the number of people here looking to come together to experiment. And I think that there is so much more willingness to experiment and go off Broadway and kick the tires a little bit. So with that, we've got a fabulous panel, great diversity. Let me open it up. What's on your mind? What would you like to ask the panel? And how did I know you were going to raise your hand? That was predictive analytics, by the way.
That was behavioral economics. Well, yeah, my question is about behavioral economics. I'd actually, Anuraksha, you do customer sentiment. Behavioral economics, the decision-making process, is very well studied in healthcare. Everything from loss aversion and biases and so on. And there's a UConn Med School professor, Dr. Villagra. He's very much into it. I've done some work with him. And exactly a year ago, he got behavioral economics from Carnegie Mellon up here, and he had a great all-day symposium on behavioral economics and decision-making in healthcare. But what I do not see is decision-making process of customers in insurance products. I see sentiment analysis and so on, but I haven't encountered any good.
So I can tell you, I've seen a ton of it, and I was privy to a ton of it in financial services, particularly around annuities and life insurance, tons. But how about the auto industry? How about other fields of insurance? What are we seeing applications for behavioral economics?
Definitely, so I'll kick that off. So part of what we do is we analyze what we call emotion. So we analyze emotion over 60 different emotions and then roll that up into high-level categories, including sarcasm, which I know I've definitely encountered people in real life that have a little trouble with that. But looking at it from the perspective of a great auto use case, and actually I want to say like auto and home, right? Like that personal insurance realm. Part of what we've looked at is how can we enable insurers to reach out more proactively to their customers. So it's not always just the customer or the agent reaching into the insurance realm. And so things like following specific journey moments. So for example, if someone's asking for a quotation to add a new car, and you know that they already have, and this is a real application that came up, you know that they have a home and a car already with them. So being able to proactively address, hey, are you looking to bundle your policies, and then also do an assessment of their coverage to date. One of the applications on this realm was around identifying a gap in the coverage that existed today, where their umbrella only covered up to a certain limit, and then being able to proactively say, hey, this is something you should look at. You also see this as individuals shop for insurance, and this is where you definitely see the value of in insurance. What people don't get, what they don't understand, they don't get, as in they don't buy, right? And so educating customers and really understanding what their understanding of specific products are is incredibly important. And so it comes down to marketing, but it also comes down to tying that in to the entire journey. And I'm really curious if...
So I'd like to add on to that, because we did, when I was at TIA, we did a lot of work with behavioral economics, particularly around women, and annuities. And by the way, try to not villainize the word annuity. It's like a curse word. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of studies that will show you can describe what it does, lifetime income, all these things. But if you add the word annuity, the 70% I want that goes down to 30%, just like that, and particularly among women. And so a lot of it has to do with understanding words and the way we present things and doing it in a way so that you take stigma out and put simplicity in. And a lot of that's graphics, colors, simplicity, words matter. So I think you had a comment to make.
Yeah, sure. I mean, insurance is another one of those dirty words, right? Let's face it, right? Nobody wants to buy insurance. It's a regulated thing. People have to have it. That's why most people that's why most people buy it, because they have to. But so a lot of what we're using, this data and thinking about how we're thinking about behavioral analytics is just like Sudha said, anticipate and engage before the customer calls, right? Do it in their preferred channel. Try to meet them where they're going to be or where they want to be, right? And anticipate, right? So, part of why I think insurance has a bad name, and you don't really have to assume it anymore. You just look at the Insurtechs and the mission statements that they have. Why did they form? Because of something that they perceive that us big insurance companies are doing wrong, right? So, so if you think about that, what we're really trying to do is reposition the company, right? Using data, using analytics, using behavioral patterns to better inform customers, right? Better inform them before that they have a loss. The unfortunate thing for a lot of customers and why insurance gets a bad name is because whether agents or brokers aren't doing a good enough job or we're not doing a good enough job, customers don't want to learn about insurance. They just want to feel covered, right? And so they find out that they're not appropriately covered at the worst possible time when they go to file a claim, right? I heard a story about somebody who had a flood in their house, right? And one of their friends, let's call him little Joey, said, hey, throw your laptop into the water that's downstairs. That's a great way to get a new laptop. Well, floods aren't covered by most home insurance policies. Like, let's not find that out, like, at that time, right? Little Joey didn't go to insurance school either. So, like, people, like, what we need to do proactively is educate customers about what is covered, what is not covered. And this, by the way, has been these have been, like, really hard questions to ask for a long time. Our lawyers in insurance, any lawyers here?
Yeah, I was going to say, how many lawyers in the room? Because I know where you're going with this. and
Yeah,
you're right.
One of the first things that I did when I got into this customer experience position, and as I said, I want a one-pager that explains what's covered, what's not, and simplifies a home insurance policy, right? I can't tell you how many no's that I got. And that's where I knew I was on the right track, right? So every lawyer in the place was like, that will never happen. We're never going to do that. Every product person told me the same thing. But we did it, right? And it's been a huge hit, right? We have this graphical thing that goes into every policy package. It says this is, instead of using the word coverage A, it says this is your dwelling coverage. This is right? We just break it down to really simple terms. And people get it, right? I know it's not exactly behavioral analytics, but it's about breaking down the barriers between what customers know and what insurance companies know. And I think that is going to help us build trust with consumers and bring back the trust in our space. And hopefully, insurance isn't a bad word.
There's so much science that says if we make people feel dumb or not understand, A, they won't act, and B, they won't feel good about having to sign that thing they really don't want to read and don't understand. So I would tell you, make friends with your lawyers and make them your partners, then make them heroes.
Let's put a spin on that a little bit, Rick. So maybe not quite behavioral, but why are we talking about annuities, an ugly word, and insurance? Nobody wants to buy it. Why aren't we talking about how do I, Mr. Customer, reduce your risk? The risk that your house is gonna burn down. The risk that your boiler, the risk that something bad's gonna do. You're gonna die. So how do we reduce?
No, you
these?
don't die. You never run out of money.
It's a good point.
Never
But how
run
do
out
we
of money.
reduce the risk? Not can I sell you some insurance, right? So there's probably a better way that we as a community can talk to our customers about insurance, and that is, how can I help you, right? What risk can I take off your plate, right?
And then what's the experience that goes behind that to really deliver it?
Sure. But that's what will sell it.
How about another question from our audience?
Questions?
You are the quietest group. Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
over there. It was behind you.
Yay. I was
One
going to say,
microphone.
because otherwise I start to do this and go, you.
It's a question more for Rick and also on here for other panelists' thoughts. The previous talk mentioned if you're not measuring it, you're not tracking it. If you're not tracking it, your people are not motivated to do anything, do the change. So what are some metrics you're measuring internally when you're getting everyone on board, say this is our customer and this is a customer that we'll be focusing on? What are some things you track in the last 4 years?
Not enough, right? So not enough, but we're starting, right? Like I said in the open, right? The first question, again, I thought it was going to be a layup. How many customers do we have, right? No one could tell me, right? But they could tell me how many policies we had, but that wasn't my question, right? I wanted to know how many customers do we have, how many policies per household do we have, and then the next question I had was, well, how do we know the difference between the value in one customer to the next, right? Customer lifetime value, right? We didn't have a measure for that either, right? So, and as a result, we treat every single customer exactly the same. Now, there's benefits to that, but there's also expense related to that, right? If a customer who has had 5 claims and has cost us way more than what we've brought in, it calls us every week and wants to know how much do they have to pay next month. How do we treat that person exactly the same as somebody who's been with us for 10 years, paid their premium without missing a beat, and is advocating for us maybe, right? On social media and with their friends and family, right? There's different values that each customer has. I won't say that we're there yet, but I will say that it is the most important focus for our company right now, which is a big, a big effort, right? With, to make that not just an outcome, but a directive and a goal of our company has been a big change. But without that measure, we've started with sentiment analysis, we've started, voice of the customer. We have lots and lots of data, as you can imagine. This company's got lots and lots of data, but it's about harnessing insights, which is most important for me, and using that data and those insights to drive the direction of the company. Another example of things that we've done with data is, again, we could always say we'd measure retention, right? We measure retention, but that was policy retention. It wasn't customer retention. So when I first started, going to our leadership team and saying, this is our customer retention number, they were like, no, that's wrong. That number is this. And I'm like, no, you've never seen this number before. This is a customer retention number. It's based on an individual and how many policies that they have. So we've been able to use some of those moments to open people's eyes to get the right focus on analytics and drive kind of the behavior that we need to move the company.
How about products per customer?
Definitely. Major focus right now.
I just add, kind of echo the comments Rick had. I think we still need the data. Our business is, again, very different than P&C because the interaction is so rare, for policyholder to interact with us. The way the products have been designed, the way they were sold, the way they were underwritten. I think we're right on the cusp of some just amazing changes in the business. Mentioned devices. Well, John Hancock's doing some really innovative stuff with the Vitality program to give discounts based on interactivity on watches. I think we're just starting to see the beginnings of going back to the roots of insurance, which is why are we here? Is why our business is. It's not that people want to die; they want to live a better life, right? And how do we enable that? And I think we'll end up with more signals we don't know. Your value as a life insurance, I don't know until you die today. That's it. Oh, you died too soon. Sorry. Don't want you. Oh, it's too late. And on the annuity side as well, it's I think as technology sort of changes the cost of we've got some system admin people on the P&C side. I think if the admin costs come down, okay, so we can offer smaller and smaller policies. We tie the business back to the devices. I think we will create some unique businesses. We all were monoline carriers, a long time ago. We split apart. I think there's going to be some very interesting connections. But the value, I think the metrics will be just totally different than what we imagined. We're all doing surveys. It's not going to be surveys. But we're going to have to, as Anurag said, we're going to have to infer a lot of stuff from data because feedback's a gift. We just don't get it that often.
Anybody else want to comment?
I think one of the things is also really looking at the specific application or use case you're trying to prove, and then looking at a larger scheme of the lifetime value, the retention. So, for example, if you're looking at, let's take workers' compensation. So if you're able to identify that in this specific industry, there is a greater incidence of injuries of non-dominant hands in this specific worker occupation group. So then, with that information, you basically are able to provide advisory, provide better education. Then you can actually measure over time, hey, has that incidence actually decreased? And when you look at a lot of customer experience initiatives, sometimes it's a lot about engagement. Are people actually using the experiences that you're creating? And part of that reflects on the experience itself, but it's also, do they know how to use it? Do they know that it exists? Is it that there might potentially be value, but they just don't know how to get there? And I think part of that is, again, going back into customer education, making it into a dialogue. People often are more willing to give feedback if it's in a conversational form versus, hey, go to this link and click through this 17-question page.
Okay, well, I think we're probably coming to the end of our time, so we're going to do the lightning round to close. And I thought those comments were absolutely terrific, and I think more and more what we measure is going to evolve and change as we go forward. And the one thing that one of you said that I think is really good, and we're seeing it more in healthcare, but I think it's going to come more and more in P&C, is pivoting from it being risk to proactive things that you can do to live longer, be healthier, protect your home, and create value. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, some of the things you're doing with Amazon, everything is going right in that direction. So, lightning round. So this is really fast. Starting with you. Best advice that you're going to give this group walking out the door. One thing, because everybody, they pick up one or two things, that makes it a good night.
Don't stop learning. I think if I kind of look at what we all have to do and what we're faced with is we're all in school. Pick something to learn the next 2 months.
I'd say target a measurable impact. So thinking back on like the best relationships in our lives, why they're impactful, and how we can potentially leverage that in a more formal ecosystem like insurance.
In a lot of big insurance companies, huge numbers, right? Personalize, right? Don't treat people like numbers, treat them as individuals, use data to understand everything about them, and without freaking them out, personalize every interaction.
I'm with Paul, learn. But don't learn by yourself. Find a partner, right? You'll learn better, you'll learn deeper, you'll learn longer with a partner.
I would probably say from some of the experience we've had is that there is never enough data. So start with whatever you have. You'll always find things that you didn't expect to find even in whatever data that you already have. So I think sometimes we have the quest for unlimited data and more data, and there's usually a lot to find in already things that you already own.
And I'm going to close by saying, be simple, 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 and then when you don't think you're simple, be simpler. And make friends with your lawyers, because we can do many innovative and wonderful things, but at the end of the day, if we put up a 30-paragraph explanation with disclaimers that confuses and freezes someone, it's all for naught. So with that, let me thank our wonderful panel and thank all of you. It's been a fun time.
Great, thanks. And guys, can I hang out for a second? These guys were great. We're thankful you all just gave them a round of applause. But the real question, I think, though, is have you been good all year? I mean, it is December, right?
It's true.
Right, Nate? Is it December?
It is.
What happened in December? Oh, yeah. I've been good. Wait, what the heck is that? What is that? Wait a minute. I'm an imposter now. Mr. Santa Claus.
Hey, dude.
Imagine meeting you here. Hey, have you met our wonderful panel?
Hey. Come here.
It's the ghost of insurance past.
And Paul. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being here and helping us out. Nice to meet you. There you go. You're welcome.
Oh yeah, and then we've got that one item thing about the raffle. Hey, you know what? A lot of people can leave here with stuff today. If you go visit Sean and team down there at Centric, they've got lots of little giveaway items. So make sure you stop down. Right, Sean? You ready to give stuff away, Sean? Sean, yeah, he said yes. Awesome. So speaking of giving away stuff, Santa, can you give us one more hand and make somebody really, really happy today? How's this a way to end a business event?
number is, I do, thank you, 139061.
All right, who's here? Who's got it? Who's got it? Who's got the Facebook? Hey, come on up, buddy. Come on. He has been a good boy. Tell us your name.
Paul Gifford.
Paul Gifford. And you're local?
Yeah, I am local. Berlin, Connecticut. Live in West Hartford.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. Santa, would you like to give him his present?
Thank you, Santa.
And can we get a picture? We get a picture. Quick pic. Thank you, everybody. And I'll close with thanking. I'll close with thanking Dina. Dina, raise your hand. Thank you. And Nate. Where's Nate? And so around. Oh, there he is by the door. Thank you, Nate. Gwen. We also have Gwen. We know Gwen. She's right here. And of course, Mr. Sentner as Santa, and Mr. Keating had to leave for the evening. But thank you all for your help and support. Thank you all for coming tonight.